Good evening, everybody. So it's the middle of March 2022 as I write this, and this is actually Nutrition and Hydration Week in the UK. So I thought I'd do a more general post this week that I think you'll all find really interesting and really useful for you. I hope you always find them interesting and useful. But I thought I'd go back to basics, really. Thinking about, exactly what is a healthy diet. When I'm with clients and talking to clients and, in what they're eating, it's not necessarily unhealthy and appears healthy at the surface level, but it isn't healthy in my eyes. And I want to go through points with you today, 7 key factors to look at when you're reviewing your own diet. And these are the things I look at when I'm looking at my clients' diets. And I've been analysing hundreds and hundreds of clients' diets over the past 12 years, and then giving my clients recommendations as to how they can make amendments and how to tweak their diets. And the following things, the sort of things I'm looking for when I'm looking at their diets in terms of how we can make their diets as healthy as they can possibly be. So obviously what I'm talking about tonight is not to help with any specific health concerns or health symptoms and conditions, but I'm sure most of you listening to this will be very much interested in day to day, without thinking about osteoporosis or menopausal symptoms. If you're just eating day to day, how should you be eating? Exactly what should you be doing or not doing, including or not including, as the case may be. So we know from our diets, the marketing hype, dieting regimes, it's all not aimed at helping you manage what you should be eating on a day-to-day basis, and it makes it go really confusing for you and creates a bit of an overwhelm, I feel. So these are not in any particular order, 7 different factors to think about. And number 1 on my list is your diet anti-inflammatory, or is it potentially pro-inflammatory? Now, anti-inflammatory foods, and this is foods that if you're eating too much of them, eating them in a little bit of an excess in combination, foods that are high in sugars, starchy carbohydrates, and excess fruit will create excess glucose in the bloodstream. And excess glucose in the bloodstream can be considered a little bit pro-inflammatory. Excess saturated fats. Now, bear in mind, I don't say no saturated fat here. I'm talking about excess saturated fat, and particularly cheap fats in processed foods and seed oils, things like sunflower oil and canola oil. These are pro-inflammatory, and they should be limited in the diet. They're going to be sending pro-inflammatory messengers. They're called prostaglandins, going to be sending these pro-inflammatory messages around the body. So if you've got a lot of these foods in your diet, you're going to be getting a lot of these inflammatory messages going around the body. Gluten has been found to be pro-inflammatory, particularly for certain people with autoimmune conditions. Gluten is not particularly helpful. And gluten is found in wheat, barley and rye. People often think oats are a gluten-containing grain, but they're not. What it can be, the factor is that oats are manufactured in a factory that is also processing wheat, rye and barley, the gluten grains, but oats in themselves are okay. But we need to be careful with too many gluten grains because they can be pro-inflammatory. Now, what about an anti-inflammatory approach? Well, this is where we need to make sure that we're eating our oily fish, those salmon, mackerel, sardines, even herrings. They contain essential fats going beyond omega-3 that are sending out anti-inflammatory messengers, these prostaglandins that are anti-inflammatory. So if you've got some foods that are potentially pro-inflammatory, but you balance them with the anti-inflammatory fats from these oily fish, then you're not going to be getting the messengers that are going to be highly pro-inflammatory. You want to balance it with the anti-inflammatory messages. So number 2, is your diet varied, or do you find your diet has too much and an excess of wheat and dairy? This is very, very common in our Western diets. Western diets, we're eating toast, we're eating pasta, we're eating pizza, we're having cereal bars that may contain some wheat. We might be having biscuits and cake, but not in excess. But if you're eating too much of the other things, even crackers, for example, or pies, these wheats, again, the wheat is a starchy grain and it's also a gluten-rich grain. That's not going to be helpful. And what about cow's milk and dairy? A lot of people are eating cheese, they're eating a lot of yogurt, even if it's a Greek yogurt. There can be a lot of yogurt in the diet, yogurt, cheese, milk in drinks or on cereal, and ice cream. Now, dairy has an imbalance to calcium and it lacks magnesium. Now, people think we need to be eating dairy to encourage strong bones. Well, we do need calcium for strong bones, but we also need a lot of other cofactors, and a very important mineral as a cofactor is magnesium. We cannot create strong bones with calcium alone. And the problem with dairy is it's sending this imbalance towards calcium without the magnesium. It sends too much of an imbalance. And if you've got too much calcium in the bloodstream, that isn't necessarily going to find its way into your joints where we need it. And therefore this can create problems elsewhere in the body with this calcium that's circulating. The other problem with dairy, in my view, in my training and my experience, in clinical experience, is that too much dairy can be considered mucus forming. Mucus forming foods can make the lymphatic system a little bit sluggish. We want good lymph flow. The lymphatic system doesn't have a heart to pump it around the body. It can get sluggish, it can become slow, it can become congested, and we need good lymph flow to encourage toxin waste withdrawal away from our tissues, for good drainage, and also for white blood cell production. So we need to be careful that we're not consuming too much wheat and dairy in our diet, and it's very common to find too much of it in the Western style diet. Now, what about processed foods? Are you eating processed foods rarely? Now, in today's modern world and with food manufacturers, we have processed foods and we have ultra processed foods. I'm sure many of you following me are not eating a lot of ultra processed foods, but if you can't recognize the individual natural ingredients in what you're eating, the food is processed to a degree. So when you're buying sliced bread, cereal bars, crisps, biscuits, ice cream, ready meals, shop-bought soups, they're all processed to a degree. They've all gone through a manufacturing process, so it's not always possible to see the original ingredients. And alongside that, they can be containing chemicals, fillers, artificial sweeteners, or added salt and sugars, or some of these more damaged processed fats that we don't want. This changes the nutritional content of the food, and particularly when we get into these ultra processed foods, where there really are not many what I call natural ingredients left at all. You're going to get more of a nutritional deficit than you're going to get as a nutritional benefit from eating those foods. Number 4, are you choosing low sugar options and therefore consuming artificial sweeteners? Now, this can be a false economy. I might have said at the start, what's your sugar intake? And that's very true. But there's so much research now around artificial sweeteners. There are different types of artificial sweeteners, but they can really negatively impact the gut microbiome. We need to be caring and nurturing our beneficial bacteria and not allowing pathogenic bacteria to take a hold and overcome and create this imbalance that we know as dysbiosis. If we get dysbiosis going on in the gut, it can lead to a leaky gut, it can create health problems around the body and lead to potentially to disease. It can create an imbalance with our mind and our mood. Now, artificial sweeteners are known to change, not feed good bacteria, but feed pathogenic bacteria, and can alter the brain and our mood. There are links to cardiovascular disease and obesity with artificial sweeteners. Surprise, surprise, that's a topic in its own right. Potentially with dementia, more and more research coming out in this space. So be very, very careful thinking going for artificial sweeteners, it's a healthy option, because I don't believe that to be the case. I would really try and avoid artificial sweeteners and really try and keep your sweet foods and sugary foods to an occasional treat. Number 5 on my list, are you eating a diet that's rich in fibre, especially with vegetables, and only a little fruit? Now we need to look after the health of the colon. We need the fibre that acts as prebiotics and fuel for the beneficial bacteria, helping it to thrive and grow. And of course, we need fibre intake to be encouraging healthy bowel movements. Fibre comes from soluble and insoluble types, and we have other types now known as resistant starch. So we need these different types of fibre for the overall health of the gut. If we don't have good daily bowel movements without straining, then this can create constipation. Toxins are held onto. That creates a bad environment again for the gut microbiome. So if you are going to eat some grains, they should always be whole grains to get some fibre. That includes the rice as well. And vegetables, we think about 5 a day. Well, let me just pause there for a moment and say, when you're thinking about 5 a day, focus on the vegetables. We need very little fruit in our diet because of the sugar content. So when you're thinking about your 5 a day, you need to be thinking about your above ground vegetables. The ones below ground are the starchy ones. We need to think mostly, not in entirety, but mostly above ground vegetables. But I have to say here that for good health, we need to be moving along the line towards 10 portions of plant-based foods a day. Doesn't need to be completely vegetables. It can contain a couple of portions of fruit. And we can also include herbs and spices, nuts and seeds in there as well. So 10 a day is the ideal aim. But beyond that, we also need to be thinking about diversity and variety. We need as much different colour as possible. The different colours are found to be providing different plant-based phytonutrients for the body, feeding different gut bacteria that we need to do. And we need 40 different plant foods every single week that delivers towards our health goals overall. And that's quite some doing, but it is achievable. A few weeks ago, I did a free 5-day challenge about getting your, well, I called it 30 in 5, but it is perfectly possible to get to 40 different plant foods every week when we're adding in nuts and seeds, quinoa, some little bit of brown rice, herbs and spices, and plenty of your vegetable intake. Number 6, are you eating to keep your blood sugar levels stable throughout the entire day? Most people are unaware of the impact of our macronutrients. That's our protein, fats, and our vegetables. Protein, fats, and our starchy carbohydrates and vegetable carbohydrates, and the impact that this has on keeping or not keeping our blood glucose levels stable throughout the day. I've already mentioned that glucose levels can contribute and be more pro-inflammatory, and if we've got too much insulin being circulating in correspondence to raised glucose, then that is going to create a yo-yo effect. It can create weight gain, it can create poor sleep, poor concentration, low mood, more difficulty coping with stress. So it's really important for our overall health and well-being to keep our blood sugar levels stable. And in simple terms, what we need to be thinking of is, are you eating protein with every meal? And it should be about 1/3 of your plate. Meats, fish, eggs, good quality tofu, soya, nuts and seeds, and pulses and lentils are our protein sources. Are you limiting your starchy carbohydrates? That's your pasta and your bread and your rice and your crackers and your potatoes, and parsnips are very, very starchy. Are you limiting them so that they're no more than about 20% of your plate? And are you making sure that you're getting the abundance of vegetables, mostly above ground vegetables, include your carrots though, on your plate, so that it's almost filled half a plate? And when you eat in that way, it really, really does help to keep your blood sugar levels stable throughout the day, as well as keeping you fulfilled, providing you with the right fats that you need, providing you with the protein that you need for health and repair of your body. And number 7, my final point of the day, something you won't be thinking of at all, but are you consuming nutrient inhibitors? Now, there are certain compounds and chemicals in our foods and drink that can inhibit the uptake of minerals into our bloodstream from our gut. Our minerals that I'm thinking of predominantly are iron, calcium, zinc and magnesium. And if we eat too many of these mineral inhibitors, nutrient inhibitors, then we can eat the best quality food, but we're not always going to be getting all of the minerals that we want from our food. Now, the things that I'm thinking of here, first and foremost, is something called phytates, known as phytic acid. We find phytates in wheat. We find it in unfermented soya. And unfermented soya is anything like our milks and our yogurts, that unfermented soya, even tofu to a certain degree. Pulses, nuts and seeds, I'll go on and talk about those in a moment, what we can do about it. Oxalates, that's a mineral inhibitor. Oxalic acid oxalates found in spinach, chard and rhubarb can create that furry taste in your mouth. Tannins found in black and green tea, even green tea contains tannins, and caffeine found in tea and coffee and caffeine-rich drinks. So what can we do? We can't eliminate all of these things from our diet, but these are the steps I would suggest you do to try and minimize your nutrient inhibitors, your mineral inhibitors. It's always best to avoid tea and coffee and caffeine-rich drinks with a meal. Have at least a 1 hour window either side of your meal so that you're not having these mineral inhibitors at the same time that food is passing through your gut. Spinach is fine as long as it's not consumed every single day, and it's better to be eaten cooked, not raw, because the cooking process helps to minimize the phytic acid levels. Soaking and rinsing nuts and seeds also helps to reduce the phytic acid level in those foods. And it's best not to consume pulses every single day. This becomes more difficult and complicated if you're vegan or vegetarian. But pulses can contain phytic acid and can inhibit the mineral uptake. The best thing to do is to rotate them as much as you can. Fermented soya is much better and has a much lower phytic acid profile than non-fermented soya. So your tempeh, your natto and your miso are better sources of soya than your non-fermented soya products. And when it comes to bread, and yes, I'm saying we shouldn't eat too much bread in our diet, but if you fancy some bread, sourdough bread, the process it goes through, the fermentation process it goes through, really does help to lower the phytic acid levels compared to standard bread that we may buy. So you need to go away and have a look at all of those aspects. And I would recommend that you try and adopt one of these in turn. Look at your diet, look at each one of these in turn, and think about how you can adopt each of one of these to make sure your diet is as healthy as it possibly can be. Remember, all of these lives are in my YouTube channel as videos. They are saved there. There's well over 100 for you to choose from now. My YouTube channel is called Peyton Principles Natural Health. That's Peyton. Peyton Principles Natural Health is my YouTube channel. Please come over and subscribe to my channel. I'm trying to boost my numbers up to well over 100 so I can have a proper name on my channel, which will be lovely for me to have. And also, if you do the subscription, then you'll be notified every time a live is added and you won't miss any at all. Thank you for watching tonight. Thank you for watching if you're watching it on my YouTube channel. I'll be back next Tuesday for my next installment, which is on the 22nd of March. Do let me know of any topics you'd like me to discuss and talk about that you think will be helpful for yourselves and for everybody to know about. And I look forward to catching up with you next week. Bye.